LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESTS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, it's Thursday, December 2nd, and you're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 6:12 p.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. My name is Andy Tran. I'm a quality engineer here at Spacex, joining you from our headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Thank you for tuning in for our 18th launch of Starlink this year and SpaceX's 27th mission of 2021. Starlink is a satellite internet constellation designed and manufactured by SpaceX that can provide high-speed, low-latency internet to people living in remote and rural locations around the globe. Today's launch will be our fourth rideshare mission of the year. This launch will be a longer one as we are reverting to a circular orbital insertion, which requires 2 burns of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. We are doing this as it is a mission requirement for our rideshare customer flying on board tonight. Inside the fairing at the top of the rocket, there are 48 Starlink satellites and 2 Black Sky satellites. Black Sky is a global monitoring company that combines space assets with advanced AI and machine learning analysis to provide customers a first-to-know advantage. I'll share a few more details about these payloads a bit later in the webcast. As for the 48 Starlink satellites, they will be inserted into low Earth orbit and bring us one step closer to near global coverage of the populated world in 2021. The latest weather forecast shows about 90% favorable chance of liftoff today. The vehicle, the satellites, and range are all looking good to support an on-time liftoff just over 11 minutes from now. Let's take a closer look at the rocket that you see on screen. Falcon 9, our 2-stage launch vehicle, stands about 70 meters tall, and when it's fully fueled, it'll hold just over 1 million pounds of propellant that the vehicle will burn through in less than 3 minutes after liftoff. We prepped Falcon 9 for launch in our hangar at the base of the pad. Upon completing final checkouts, Falcon 9 rolled out to the pad with the Starlink and Black Sky payloads and went vertical on Monday around 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From there, we had successful static fire of our 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage yesterday. The bottom 2/3 of the vehicle is what we refer to as the first stage. You may be able to see the soot markings left over from this booster's previous 8 flights supporting the GPS-3 mission, Turksat 5A, Transporter 2, and 5 previous Starlink missions. The first stage accelerates the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere into space with the help of 9 Merlin engines at the base of the rocket. Following separation from the second stage, we'll be attempting to recover our first stage for a 9th time on our drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas, staged off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. You can see it on screen right now. If successful, it will make the 89th recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage and 96 total first stage landings if you include our Falcon Heavy booster recoveries. On top of the first stage is the black carbon fiber inner stage, and then on top of that is the Falcon 9 second stage, which has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine. Once the first and second stages separate at about 2.5 minutes into the mission, the MVAC engine will ignite and carry the Starlink satellites and 2 Black Sky satellites to a low Earth orbit around the Earth. The stack of satellites is safely enclosed inside of the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which you see on screen right now. This protects the payload from aerothermal loads, heating, and contamination during ascent. Once we reach the vacuum of space, we will jettison the fairing as the second stage continues its journey to orbit. Just as we reuse the Falcon 9, we recover and reuse our fairing halves as well. The fairing halves we're using today are brand new, and we're going to be attempting to recover these halves using our recovery vessel, Bob. Propellants have been loading on the vehicle since the T-minus 35-minute mark. Falcon 9 is a bi-propellant vehicle, which means it uses 2 propellants, a fuel and an oxidizer. An oxidizer is a type of chemical that a fuel requires in order to burn. Most things here on Earth burn using oxygen, which is readily available in the Earth's atmosphere. But in space, there is no atmosphere to provide oxygen or other oxidizers, so the rocket needs to carry up their own. In Falcon 9's case, it's super chilled liquid oxygen called LOX. The liquid oxygen is chilled well below its boiling point so that it can become what we call densified, which means it has a much greater amount of mass per volume, and we can load more of it onto the booster. For fuel, we use a refined form of kerosene known as RP1. In addition to its propellants, Falcon 9 also needs an ignition source in order to go, and for that we use the chemical TTAB, or triethylaluminum and triethylborane. Currently, fuel is nearly fully loaded on the first stage and starting to load on the second stage. Once all tanks are full, both stages will continue to be topped off with propellant until about the T-minus 2 minute mark to keep temperatures as cold as possible. Again, weather is looking fantastic for tonight's liftoff. The vehicle and satellites in the fairing, they are remaining good as well. We are targeting an on-time liftoff just under 7.5 minutes from now. And as I mentioned earlier, today's mission marks the 4th official mission under SpaceX's SmallSat rideshare program this year, which gives small satellites flexible access to what is now the most flown operational rocket in the United States, the Falcon 9. Tonight, we're flying 48 Starlink satellites to make room for 2 Black Sky payloads from our customer's spaceflight. In an effort to help Black Sky rapidly expand its growing constellation of high revisit satellites, Spaceflight Incorporated is managing the launch of these 2 additional Black Sky high-resolution, multispectral Gen 2 satellites to low Earth orbit, expanding Black Sky's network in space and offering of real-time geospatial intelligence and monitoring services. Black Sky combines high-resolution images captured by its constellation of microsatellites with its proprietary artificial intelligence software to deliver analytics and insights to industries including transportation, infrastructure, land use, defense, supply chain management, and humanitarian aid. So far this year, we've launched over 200 rideshare payloads to orbit. And this includes the ones launched on the Transporter-1 mission in January, a previous Starlink launch in May, and the Transporter-2 mission in June. After this mission, our next rideshare mission is scheduled to launch at the beginning of next year, and that's going to be Transporter 3, which will be a dedicated rideshare launch to sun-synchronous orbit. As part of our SmallSat rideshare program, we offer 3 dedicated rideshare missions to sun-synchronous orbits per year, as well as launch opportunities on our Starlink missions like what you're seeing here today. So we are about 5.5 minutes from liftoff of our 18th Starlink launch of 2021, and the Falcon 9 is progressing into the final stages of the countdown. Next up, the truss structure next to the vehicle, known as the transporter erector, we also refer to it as the TE. It will begin to start to retract away from the Falcon 9 vehicle. In preparation for retracting, the TE clamp arms will open up, and then the transporter erector will begin to pull away from the rocket slightly to its pre-launch position about 2 degrees from the vehicle. Then at T0, hydraulics pull the TE even further away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off. The transporter erector is also the structure that provides liquids, gases, electrical connections to the second stage, as well as air conditioning to the payload fairing. Again, the vehicle is continuing to load propellant. Once we're fully topped off, we'll have over 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. On screen right now is a view of the fairing. Right beneath the fairing, those are the clamp arms that we are expecting to open up, and here they go. Once these clamp arms open up, we should start to see the truss structure begin to recline away from Falcon 9 in preparation for liftoff. So again, we are continuing to load propellant on both the stages. The first and second stages should finish loading propellant about a minute apart from one another. The first stage finishing up around the T-minus 3-minute mark, and the second stage finishing up around the T-minus 2-minute mark. At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup. This means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. And just inside T-minus 2 seconds, we light the Merlin 1D engines, and then we're set for liftoff. The Starlink payload and the Black Sky payloads inside the fairing continue to be healthy. The Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues at this time. So we're starting to hear some hissing and popping. This is venting from our LOX lines as part of the transporter erector's job to continue to fill the vehicle with propellant. We can also start to see some white clouds forming around the Falcon 9. This will become more and more prominent as we get closer to T0. This is just that super cold liquid oxygen starting to densify and form those clouds that you start to see when it meets the warmer ambient air temperatures of Florida. So again, we have pretty much perfect weather in Florida for today's liftoff attempt. This is a rideshare mission carrying 48 Starlink satellites as well as 2 Black Sky satellites enclosed in the fairing that you see on screen right now. Again, there goes those hissing and popping. That is normal and expected at this stage in the countdown. At this point, the propellant has been fully loaded on the vehicle, and we are just under a minute away. Both stages should be beginning to pressurize for liftoff. So we are 40 seconds away. Let's listen in to terminal count as we prepare for liftoff of the 48 Starlink satellites and the 2 Black Sky satellites.
T-minus 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds and counting. T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff.
Nominal power and telemetry.
So we are about a minute into liftoff. Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. In just a few seconds here, we are expecting the call out for max Q. That is the period where the vehicle will experience the highest amount of aerodynamic pressures.
Max Q.
And there was the call out. So now that we've gone past the period of high stresses on the vehicle, we have 3 events happening in quick succession in about a minute. First, we have main engine cutoff, also referred to as MECO, then stage separation, followed by second engine start 1, also known as SES1. Main engine cutoff is where all 9 Merlin engines on the first stage will shut down to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation. During stage separation, the first and second stage will separate from one another. The first stage will make its way back to Earth for landing, while the second stage continues its journey with our satellites with the third event, which is second engine start 1. The single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will then ignite and continue to propel those Starlink satellites and Black Sky satellites into orbit.
Eco.
Stage separation confirmed.
So you can see on screen we had successful main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and on the right-hand side of the screen, that is the single Merlin vacuum engine glowing red hot. On the left-hand side of the screen is a view of our first stage. I think we're getting some views of twilight right now as the sun has just set in the East Coast. In a few seconds, we are expecting fairing deploy, and that will expose the satellites to the vacuum of space.
Fairing separation confirmed.
We got the audio and video confirmation on the right-hand side of your screen. The fairing halves have deployed. We are going to attempt to recover those using our recovery vessel Bob later on in the mission. For now, the mission is going great. Again, the left-hand side is a view from the top of our first stage looking downward. You can see little plumes of gas coming out. That is nitrogen for our as part of our attitude control system to help orient the first stage booster properly as it makes its way back to attempt its 9th landing on our drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. Right-hand side is a view of the second stage Merlin vacuum engine, the 48 Starlink satellites, and the 2 Black Sky satellites that we had mentioned earlier. They are on the opposite end of that engine. And so again, they are going to be in this burn for another couple of minutes as they continue to make their way to low Earth orbit. So in order to make its way back to the drone ship, the first stage needs to execute 2 burns. The first is an entry burn where 3 of the Merlin 1D engines will ignite. This helps to slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper parts of the Earth's atmosphere. The second burn is the landing burn. This is a single engine burn, and this will bring the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land on our drone ship.
Trajectory nominal.
That first burn, the entry burn, is expected to start around T plus 6 minutes and 22 seconds and last for about 20 seconds. For those that are just joining us, we are in the middle of SpaceX's 27th mission of 2021. Both stages have separated. We did have a successful liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40. Things are continuing to go well for tonight's mission. So we are about 20 seconds away from the beginning of that entry burn on the first stage. We do have camera views right now. It is a little dark, but as soon as that entry burn starts, we should see that first stage being lit up. as it'll slow itself down before hitting the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Stage 1 interburn startup.
On-flight termination system is safed.
All right, 3 engines have relit on the first stage. If you're keeping track, at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, there is a speedometer of sorts that is tracking the velocity of the first stage. You can see that we're starting to reduce that velocity.
Stage 1 interburn shutdown.
If you keep an eye on that, as soon as the first stage hits the denser parts of the atmosphere, we'll continue to slow down its speed in preparation for the next burn, the landing burn. And that landing burn is expected to happen a few seconds after the T+8 minute mark.
Trajectory nominal.
The MVAC engine performance on the second stage continues to go well. A few seconds after we complete the landing burn, we are expecting to turn off this engine and enter a coast phase. And as a reminder, we will be reigniting this engine about 50 minutes from now.
Stage 1 landing burn.
So there's the call out. The landing burn has begun.
Terminal guidance.
In just a few seconds here, we're going to see if we can land this first stage booster for the 9th time.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
You can hear the cheer and the applause, and there's the visual. This first stage booster has landed 9 times. This marks our 89th overall successful recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage, and the 129th successful flight of a Falcon 9 first stage. So what we're waiting on now is confirmation of second engine cutoff, as well as confirmation of a good orbital insertion. As I was speaking, we did get that confirmation. So the second stage, with all of its satellites, are entering a coast phase for about 50 minutes. We're going to leave you with some space tunes, and we'll be back here at the T+59 minute mark.
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland. Detected loss of signal, Bermuda. Detected loss of signal, Newfoundland. Expected loss of signal. Good heli. Acquisition of signal, Diego Garcia. Expected loss of signal, Diego Garcia.
America's spaceship lands at Van Scott in outer space. In outer space.
What precisely kind of information do you want from the study? What do you want? What do you want?
The first rocket is then dropped its fuel exhausted. The second rocket ignites and takes off. And the second rocket burns up. The third and last one takes over. Final thrust that carries the satellite into its closing orbit.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, a quick recap of today's mission. We had successful
Acquisition
liftoff
of signal,
from Cape
Tasmania.
Canaveral Space Force Station at 6:12 p.m. Eastern Time. We then had successful stage separation, recovered our first stage after its 9th flight on our drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, and had a successful second stage MVAC engine burn. We're now waiting on the second relight of the second stage, Merlin vacuum engine, and this burn should last just a few seconds.
MVAC ignition. Deco 2.
So we just saw that very, very short clip there. The Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage ignited for a few seconds. Then we also got confirmation of a good second engine cutoff. So we are waiting on confirmation of a good orbit on the second stage. We are
Nominal orbit insertion.
a few minutes away from the first payload deploy, and we did hear the confirmation of good orbital insertion. That was a spectacular shot of the second stage with the Earth in the background. What the second stage does at deployment is actually largely determined by customer requirements and make sure that the payloads don't run into each other. For this particular mission, we have 2 rideshare payloads in addition to the Starlink satellite stack. The rideshare payloads are deployed while the stage is not spinning. Here they are on screen. By contrast, the Starlink stack is always deployed while spinning. Will actually spin at a rate at about 3 degrees per second. This creates a small difference in velocity between the individual Starlink satellites, allowing them to separate over time. So again, we are about 2.5 minutes away from the first Black Sky satellite from deploying. Again, we do have 2 of them on board today, and they will be deploying about 3 minutes apart from one another. And this shot right here, you can start to see the Starlink stacks. Some interesting notes about the Starlink. Each of those satellites are about 500 pounds. When we deploy them, we'll deploy them into low Earth orbit, but then over the next couple of days and weeks, they'll actually fire their onboard thrusters to get to their final operational orbit. The Starlink satellites operate at about 550 kilometers in altitude, and by contrast, the International Space Station is orbiting the Earth at about 400 kilometers. So the Starlink stacks are operating a little bit higher than the International Space Station. So again, we are waiting on the first deployment of the Black Sky satellite. It's going to happen about a minute from now. It is the first of 3 payload deployments. Our first and second payloads are about 3 minutes apart. Black Sky is a global monitoring company that combines space assets with advanced AI and machine learning analysis to provide customers a first-to-know advantage. For now, as we wait, we are enjoying some awesome views of the second stage, space, and the Earth. And as we continue to orbit around the Earth, we are trying to connect to ground stations here on the floor, and so we'll periodically lose some signals, but you can see that we're trying to get the signals back and the video footage back as much as possible as we hopefully can see the Black Sky satellites deploying from the top of the second stage.
Global 12 payload deploy confirmed.
So we did get audio confirmation. I am looking on screen right now to see if we can see it visually. Again, the two Black Sky satellites are actually positioned at the top of the stack. And so the objects, if you will, that are closest to the screen, those are the Starlink satellites. So we didn't quite get the visual confirmation of the first satellite. Maybe we'll get the second one. But again, we are about 3 minutes away from the second deployment of the Black Sky satellite. That one interesting thing to note as we continue to get this view here is in space and maybe without a point of reference, things seem to look very, very stagnant. If you look at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, we are actually traveling at 26,000 kilometers an hour around the Earth. And this is really this is close to orbital velocity, but at those speeds, you could pretty much travel end to end from America in about 10 minutes. So even though it doesn't look like we're moving very, very quickly, the second stage and the satellites are indeed zipping around the Earth. So right now, the second stage is actually just a little bit south and east of Australia. It's continuing to head east. And we are about a minute away from the second Black Sky satellite deployment. For those that are just joining, we did have successful deployment of our first Black Sky satellite. This is the 4th rideshare mission of 2021 for us here at SpaceX and the 27th mission overall. Just about 15 seconds away from our expected deployment of the second and final Black Sky satellite.
Global 13, payload deploy confirmed.
And that is great news. We've now successfully deployed the 2 Black Sky satellites on behalf of our customer spaceflight. We are wishing them bon voyage to the 2 Black Sky sats, and it was our pleasure to give you a lift today. With that, we are awaiting the deployment of our 48 Starlink satellites, which is scheduled to occur about 20 minutes from now. At the time of the deployment, we won't actually have ground station coverage, but we'll return just before we acquire signal to the South Texas station about T+1 hour and 32 minutes to get confirmation of that deployment. We will see you back here in just a few moments.
Expected loss of signal, Tasmania.
sat there, 22nd century AD. We sat there and looked at a rocket from Mars, and it just boggled the mind and mind and mind and mind. And the technology caught up to them.